a struggling janitor, just trying to raise his little girl. A powerful CEO, untouchable and cold, and a child's innocent drawing that shatters the walls between them. At first, it seems like fate has given this broken family a second chance. She smiles, she laughs, she even dares to play the role of mommy. But behind those glass walls of power lies a cruel truth. Because one signature, one ruthless decision, could destroy everything this little girl dreams of. Will love be strong enough to survive betrayal? Or will a single father lose the one chance at family he never thought he'd find? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The pristine boardroom buzzed with activity as Charlotte Grant stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Charts and graphs flickered across the wall-mounted screen behind her, while board members in expensive suits nodded along to her presentation. The evening sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden streaks across the polished surface. As you can see from the fourth quarter projections, Charlotte's crisp voice cut off as the heavy boardroom door creaked open. Little Lily Walker stood in the doorway, her bright yellow backpack decorated with butterflies slung over one shoulder. Her dark curls were slightly messy from the day's activities, and she clutched a piece of paper in her small hands. Her eyes widened at the room full of adults, but instead of shrinking back, she broke into a warm smile. "Sorry to interrupt," she said in her clear child's voice. "I made something special." The board members exchanged glances, some annoyed, others amused. Charlotte's perfectly manicured hand gripped her presentation remote tighter, but her face remained neutral. "Sweetheart, this is a private meeting," she said firmly but not unkindly. "Where's your father?" "He's cleaning the bathrooms on the 10th floor," Lily explained matter-of-factly. "But look what I drew." She held up her artwork with pride, the paper crinkling slightly in her excited grip. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands. One was tall with spiky brown hair, clearly meant to be Ethan. The smallest had curly hair and a yellow dress. Obviously, Lily herself. But it was the third figure that caused several board members to stifle chuckles. A stick-figure woman in a business suit, with long straight hair and high heels, labeled clearly in crayon, "Mommy." "That's you!" Lily pointed at Charlotte, beaming. "See? You're holding hands with me and Daddy." The awkward silence that followed felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Someone cleared their throat. Another board member poorly disguised a laugh as a cough. Charlotte's carefully composed expression cracked for just a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or fear, before her professional mask slipped back into place. But her smile had lost its confidence, becoming brittle around the edges. I need to excuse myself for a moment," Charlotte said, her voice slightly strained. She set down her remote with precise movements, as if focusing on the simple action helped her maintain control. Without meeting anyone's eyes, she strode quickly toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. As she passed Lily, the little girl reached out to touch her hand, but Charlotte pulled away, quickening her pace. The boardroom door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the uncomfortable silence. Lily's smile began to fade as she looked around at the adults, sensing something was wrong but not understanding what. She hugged her, drawing closer to her chest, suddenly less certain. "Lily!" Ethan's worried voice carried from the hallway seconds before he appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. His janitor's uniform was wrinkled, and concern etched deep lines around his eyes. "There you are! I've been looking everywhere!" He froze as he took in the scene. The boardroom full of executives, his daughter standing small and confused in the middle of it all, and the now empty spot where Charlotte had been standing. "I am so sorry," he said, his face flushing red with embarrassment. "She's supposed to stay in the break room while I work. This won't happen again." He hurried forward and gently took Lily's hand. "Come on, sweetheart, we need to go." "But I wanted to show my picture," Lily protested, as Ethan led her toward the door. "Not now," he whispered, his voice tight with emotion he was trying to control. "These people are very busy." As they left, snippets of conversation followed them into the hallway. "Well, that was awkward. Poor kid. Did you see Grant's face?" Ethan walked quickly, leading Lily through the maze of corporate hallways until they reached his small janitor's closet. The familiar smell of cleaning supplies and the sight of his organized cart helped ground him, but his hands were shaking slightly as he closed the door behind them. He knelt down to Lily's level, trying to find the right words. His daughter's lower lip was trembling now, and she clutched her drawing with both hands. "Did I do something wrong, Daddy?" she asked in a small voice. Ethan's heart clenched. He reached out and smoothed her curls, buying himself a moment to steady his voice. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. But we can't interrupt important meetings like that, okay? I just wanted to show Ms. Grant my picture," Lily said, holding it out. "See? It's us being a family." Ethan looked at the drawing, at the simple crayon lines that represented his daughter's deepest wish, and felt his throat tighten. He remembered the way Charlotte had fled the room, how she couldn't even look at Lily as she passed. The sting of humiliation mixed with a deeper ache he didn't want to examine too closely. "Lily," he said gently. "Miss Grant. She's not your mommy, sweetheart." Lily's face scrunched up in that stubborn expression he knew so well. "But she should be," she said, with the absolute certainty of a child. "She's pretty and smart, and she makes you smile sometimes, when you think I'm not looking." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, fighting back the wave of emotion her words triggered. When he opened them again, he forced himself to smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Life's not that simple, honey. Miss Grant is a very important person, with a very busy life, and we're different from her. Do you understand?" Lily looked down at her drawing, then back at her father's face. "But Daddy, you always say different isn't bad. You say it just makes things special." The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of Charlotte Grant's corner office, casting prisms of light across the modern furnishings. Ethan Walker stood just inside the doorway, his weathered hands fidgeting with the zipper of his gray janitor's uniform. The plush carpet beneath his work boots made him acutely aware of every speck of dirt he might track in. Charlotte sat behind her expansive desk, her posture perfect in her tailored navy suit. Her fingers were steepled under her chin as she studied him. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Mr. Walker," she finally said, her voice softer than he expected. "Please, have a seat." Ethan lowered himself carefully onto one of the sleek leather chairs facing her desk. "Miss Grant, about last night I'm so sorry. Lily shouldn't have interrupted your meeting. I've talked to her about boundaries." Charlotte raised her hand to stop him. "That's not why I called you here." She paused, something vulnerable flickering across her usually composed features. "I'm the one who should apologize." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, my reaction last night was..." She looked down at her desk, reorganizing papers that were already perfectly aligned. "It was cold. Unprofessional, really. Your daughter's drawing just caught me off guard." The morning traffic hummed 40 stories below as Charlotte stood and walked to the wall of windows. Her reflection showed a slight tremor in her normally steady hands. "I grew up without a father," she said quietly, still facing the city below. "My mother. She did her best, but she was always working, always absent. I spent more time with nannies than family." She turned back to face him. "So when your daughter showed that drawing, with me, labeled as..." She swallowed hard. "Well, it struck a chord I wasn't prepared for." Ethan's throat tightened. "Ms. Grant, you don't owe me any explanations." "Charlotte," she corrected, returning to her desk. "Please, call me Charlotte." She pulled an elegant cream-colored envelope from her drawer. "The company is hosting our annual charity gala this Saturday evening. It's quite an event dinner, dancing, silent auction, all to benefit local children's programs." She extended the envelope toward him. "I'd like you and Lily to come as my personal guests." Ethan stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. That's very kind, but we couldn't possibly..." "Please," Charlotte interrupted. Her professional mask slipped again, revealing something that looked almost like hope. "Consider it my way of making amends for last night. Besides..." A small smile touched her lips. "I think Lily would enjoy seeing the ballroom when it's not empty." Ethan's hand shook slightly as he accepted the envelope. The paper was thick and expensive, with gold lettering that caught the morning light. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like this." "That's been taken care of," Charlotte said quickly. "The invitation includes a credit at Morton's department store, for both you and Lily." She held up her hand as Ethan began to protest. "I insist. It would make me very happy to see you both there." Ethan stood slowly, the envelope feeling impossibly heavy in his hands. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Charlotte replied simply. The warmth in her voice was something entirely new, something that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As he turned to leave, Charlotte called out once more, "Mr. Walker, Ethan." He looked back to find her smiling, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you for considering it." Ethan stepped out of the office in a daze, his mind spinning. The envelope crinkled in his tight grip as he made his way to the break room where Lily was waiting with her morning cereal before school. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy, what's that?" She pointed to the envelope with a spoon dripping milk. "It's—" He looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, her eyes bright with curiosity. "It's an invitation. Miss Grant has asked us to a party." Lily's eyes grew wide with excitement. "A party? A real party?" She bounced in her seat, nearly knocking over her cereal bowl. "Can we go? Please? Please? Please?" Ethan sank into the chair beside her, running a hand through his graying hair. The weight of the invitation seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. A charity gala, with executives and wealthy donors, with Charlotte Grant. "I don't know, sweetheart," he sighed, studying the elegant script on the envelope. "It's a very fancy party, but Miss Grant invited us special," Lily insisted, her lower lip beginning to quiver. "She wants us to come. She smiled at me yesterday, Daddy. A real smile, not a pretend one." Ethan looked at his daughter, seeing so much of her mother in her hopeful expression. Sarah had always been able to see the best in people, to believe in possibilities. He wondered what she would say about this situation. "Daddy, are we going to a party?" Lily asked again, her voice small and pleading. Ethan sighed, the envelope still clutched in his hands. The morning sun streamed through the break room window, catching the gold lettering just as it had in Charlotte's office. He thought of the vulnerability he'd seen in Charlotte's eyes, so different from her usual corporate armor. He thought of her confession about her childhood, freely given. He thought of the genuine warmth in her smile as he'd left. Back in their small apartment, Ethan sat at the worn kitchen table, turning the cream-colored invitation over in his hands. The elegant black script seemed to mock him with its formality. Lily bounced around the tiny living room, her excitement filling their modest home with an energy he hadn't seen in months. "Can we go, Daddy? Please?" Lily's eyes sparkled as she twirled, pretending she was already at the ball. "I promise I'll be extra good." Ethan's throat tightened. The memory of Charlotte's unexpected kindness in her office still confused him. She had seemed so different from the stern CEO he usually glimpsed through boardroom windows, more human, somehow. But the thought of stepping into her world, of mixing with executives in $1,000 suits, made his stomach churn. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's not really our kind of party." Lily's face fell, and she stopped twirling. "But Miss Grant invited us special." She climbed onto his lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "And I already know what I want to wear." Ethan couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, even as reality pressed in. "Honey, we can't afford a fancy dress right now. And my old suit." He glanced toward his bedroom, where his one suit hung in the closet, untouched since Sarah's funeral. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, stood in the hallway with a knowing smile. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, her accent warm and familiar. "My granddaughter left some dresses here last summer. Maybe one would fit Lily?" Before Ethan could protest, Mrs. Rodriguez had disappeared into her apartment, returning moments later with a pale blue dress that made Lily gasp with delight. The fabric was simple but pretty, with small silver buttons down the back and a satin sash. "It's perfect," Lily exclaimed, holding the dress against herself and spinning. Mrs. Rodriguez patted Ethan's arm. "Let her have this moment, mihijo. Sometimes life gives us unexpected gifts." That evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Ethan stood in front of his open closet. The suit hung there like a remnant from another life, dark gray, slightly outdated, but still dignified. He remembered buying it for his first real job interview, Sarah helping him pick it out. His fingers traced the lapel, collecting a thin film of dust. In the bathroom mirror, he studied his reflection critically. The years of night shifts and worry had left their mark. Lines around his eyes, silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He splashed water on his face, trying to wash away his doubts. The next day, between his morning shift at the diner and evening cleaning at the office tower, Ethan visited the dry cleaners. The elderly Korean owner, Mr. Park, listened sympathetically as Ethan explained about the gala. "Special occasion needs special care," Mr. Park declared, carefully examining the suit. "I will make it like new." When Ethan picked it up 2 days later, the transformation was remarkable. The fabric looked fresher, the creases sharp and clean. Mr. Park had even replaced a loose button and reinforced the worn cuffs. That afternoon, Ethan helped Lily try on Mrs. Rodriguez's dress. His daughter's face glowed as she admired herself in the mirror, twirling so the skirt flared out. "Now I look like a princess," she declared. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with a small jewelry box containing a delicate silver necklace with a tiny butterfly pendant. "Every princess needs her jewels," she winked, fastening it around Lily's neck. Ethan's protest died on his lips when he saw Lily's joy. These small kindnesses from their neighbors made him realize they weren't entirely alone in this world. In their tiny bathroom, Ethan pulled out his old electric razor, carefully trimming his stubble. He found an ancient bottle of cologne in the back of the medicine cabinet, Sarah's last Christmas gift to him. The familiar scent brought a rush of memories, but for once they didn't overwhelm him with sadness. The evening before the gala, Ethan stood in his bedroom, staring at the suit hanging on the back of the door. The sight reminded him of medieval stories Lily loved, where knights would prepare their armor before a great challenge. This was his armor, not against dragons or evil wizards, but against a world that seemed equally daunting. His reflection in the bedroom mirror showed a man caught between two worlds, the hard-working janitor who mopped floors in the shadows, and someone trying to step into the light of crystal chandeliers and champagne toasts. The suit represented more than just clothing. It was a bridge between these worlds, however temporary. Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, hugging her stuffed rabbit. "Your suit looks handsome, Daddy," she said sleepily. Ethan smiled, touched by her simple faith in him. "Thank you, sweetheart. Now back to bed. We have a big day tomorrow." After tucking her in again, Ethan returned to his room. The suit hung there silently, like a question waiting to be answered. His work-roughened hands ghosted over the smooth fabric one more time before he forced himself to step away. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Plaza sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Ethan tugged at his borrowed suit collar, feeling like an imposter among the sea of designer gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos. He watched as Lily twirled in her borrowed purple dress, her face beaming with wonder at the elegant decorations. "Look, Daddy, it's like a princess castle." Lily pointed at the towering floral arrangements that adorned each table. As they made their way through the crowd, Ethan couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and whispered conversations. A couple nearby barely tried to hide their commentary. "Isn't that the night janitor?" a woman in a sequined gown murmured to her companion. "What's he doing here?" her partner responded with raised eyebrows. Ethan's cheeks burned, but he kept his head high. He'd learned long ago that dignity wasn't about what you wore or how much money you had. Still, the weight of their stares made his shoulders tense. "Ethan! Lily! You made it!" Charlotte's voice cut through the whispers like a warm ray of sunshine. She approached them in a stunning blue evening gown, her usual corporate armor replaced by something softer, more approachable. Lily's face lit up. "Miss Charlotte!" She ran forward, wrapping her arms around Charlotte's waist without hesitation. Charlotte laughed, a genuine sound that Ethan had never heard in the office hallways. She knelt down to Lily's level, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "You look absolutely beautiful, Lily. That purple dress is perfect on you." "Thank you," Lily beamed. Daddy said I looked just like Mommy did in pictures. A flash of gentle understanding crossed Charlotte's face as she met Ethan's eyes. He nodded slightly, grateful for her tactful response. As the evening progressed, Lily refused to leave Charlotte's side. She held her hand as Charlotte made her rounds, greeting board members and important clients. Each time they met someone new, Lily would proudly announce, "This is my new mommy." The first time it happened, Ethan nearly choked on his water. But Charlotte handled it with remarkable grace, letting out a light laugh and smoothly transitioning to business discussions. Yet Ethan noticed something change in her eyes each time Lily said it, a softening, a warmth that seemed to grow stronger as the night went on. "Mr. Thompson, how lovely to see you," Charlotte greeted an elderly board member. Before she could continue, Lily tugged on her dress. "My new mommy says the fountain in the lobby is real marble," Lily informed the man seriously. "She knows everything." The old man's eyebrows shot up, but Charlotte didn't miss a beat. "Well, not everything," she said, giving Lily's hand a gentle squeeze. "For instance, I didn't know purple dresses could be quite so twirly until you showed me earlier." Ethan watched from a few steps away, amazed at how naturally Charlotte adapted to Lily's presence. The CEO he knew from work, commanding, sometimes intimidating, had transformed into someone who could kneel in an expensive gown to examine a child's sparkly shoes without a second thought. The orchestra struck up a slower melody, and couples began moving to the dance floor. Lily's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Can we dance, please?" She looked between Charlotte and Ethan hopefully. Charlotte glanced at Ethan, a question in her eyes. He hesitated for just a moment before stepping forward and offering his hand with an awkward half-bow that made Lily giggle. "May I have this dance? Both of you?" Charlotte's smile was warm as she took his hand. "I'd be honored." They moved to the edge of the dance floor, where Lily stood between them, holding both their hands. Ethan's dancing skills were limited to swaying back and forth, but Charlotte moved with natural grace, helping guide them in a simple circle. Lily laughed as they spun her carefully between them, her purple dress swishing around her legs. The whispers from earlier faded away, replaced by the soft music and the sound of his daughter's joy. "You're doing great," Charlotte murmured to Ethan, noticing his concentration as he tried not to step on anyone's feet. "I'm more used to mopping these floors than dancing on them," he admitted quietly. "Sometimes the best dancers are the ones who clean the floor," she replied with a wink that made him chuckle despite himself. As they moved together, Ethan couldn't help but notice how right it felt. Lily between them, Charlotte's hand warm in his, the three of them creating their own little world amid the glittering crowd. For the first time since losing his wife, he felt something shift in his heart. A door he'd thought permanently closed creaked open just a fraction. Lily looked up at them both, her face glowing with happiness. "This is the best party ever," she declared. Charlotte's free hand smoothed Lily's hair back gently. "It certainly is, sweetheart." The moment stretched out like spun sugar, delicate and sweet. Ethan found himself holding his breath, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over them. But as the music continued, and Charlotte's hand remained steady in his, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a single evening's magic. The grand ballroom slowly emptied as the last guests departed the gala. Charlotte watched from her perch near the elaborate ice sculpture as Ethan guided a sleepy Lily toward the exit, her tiny hand clutching his. Something about their simple, genuine affection made her chest tighten. An hour later, Charlotte stood in her penthouse, 40 floors above the city lights. The space was immaculate, all clean lines, modern furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows. Perfect, pristine, and utterly lonely. She slipped off her heels, letting them drop onto the plush carpet with a soft thud. Her fingers trembled slightly as she poured herself a glass of red wine. The liquid swirled in the crystal glass, deep and dark against the city lights twinkling beyond her windows. She walked over to her designer handbag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, Lily's crayon drawing from the boardroom. She had quietly taken it after everyone left, unable to let it go. Charlotte sank into her white leather sofa, carefully smoothing out the wrinkled paper. 3 stick figures stood hand in hand, drawn in bright colors that seemed to mock the monochrome sophistication of her apartment. There was Ethan, tall and wearing what appeared to be his janitor's uniform, drawn in blue. Lily in the middle, wearing a triangle dress in purple. And then there was Charlotte herself, drawn in red, wearing what Lily must have thought was a business suit. Above the figures, in wobbly children's handwriting, "My family." The wine glass trembled in her hand as memories flooded back. She was 7 again, just like Lily, sitting alone at her desk while the other kids made Father's Day cards in class. Her mother was always working, climbing the corporate ladder, barely home except to sleep. Their housekeeper had raised her more than her own mother had. "I turned into her," Charlotte whispered to the empty room. "I became exactly what I swore I'd never be." She stood up abruptly, walking to the wall of windows. Her reflection stared back at her, perfectly styled hair, designer dress, not a thing out of place. The image of success. And yet tonight, for the first time in years, she felt its hollowness. At the gala, she'd watched Lily twirl in her borrowed dress, pure joy radiating from her face. She'd seen Ethan's quiet dignity, the way he held his head high despite the whispers and stares. They had so little, yet somehow they seemed to have everything that mattered. Charlotte took another sip of wine, trying to steady her nerves. Her phone buzzed with work emails, merger proposals, quarterly projections, board meeting agendas. Usually, she'd be answering them until midnight. Tonight, she couldn't bring herself to care. Instead, she found herself walking to her home office, pulling out old photo albums she hadn't looked at in years. There she was, age 7, at a school play. The empty seat reserved for her mother, clearly visible in the background. Another photo, her high school graduation. Her mother had made it for the ceremony, but left immediately after for a business emergency. "Is this all there is?" Charlotte asked the silent room. She looked around at her designer furniture, her expensive art pieces, her wall of professional awards and achievements. Everything she'd worked so hard for suddenly felt like a hollow victory. She returned to the sofa, picking up Lily's drawing again. The stick figure family smiled up at her with simple crayon smiles. Charlotte touched the word "Mommy" written above her figure, remembering how Lily had proudly introduced her to everyone at the gala. She should have been embarrassed, should have corrected the child. Instead, each time she heard it, something warm and unfamiliar had bloomed in her chest. The wineglass was empty now. Charlotte placed it on the coffee table and leaned back, closing her eyes. She could still hear Lily's laughter as they danced together, could still see Ethan's surprised smile when she'd helped Lily with her dinner napkin. Such simple moments, yet they felt more real than any business deal she'd ever closed. Her phone buzzed again. Without looking at it, she turned it off completely, something she hadn't done in years. The silence that followed felt both terrifying and liberating. Across town, in his small apartment, Ethan tucked an exhausted Lily into bed. Her borrowed party dress hung carefully on a hanger, ready to be returned tomorrow. She'd refused to let him wipe off the little bit of lip gloss Charlotte had shared with her at the gala. "Daddy?" Lily mumbled sleepily. "Did you see? Miss Charlotte danced with us, just like a real mommy would." Ethan's heart clenched. "Go to sleep, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing her forehead. In his tiny living room, he loosened his tie and sank into his worn armchair. The old suit jacket still smelled faintly of the gala's fancy appetizers and Charlotte's subtle perfume from when they'd danced. He should be feeling embarrassed about tonight, about being so out of place among all those wealthy people. Instead, all he could think about was how Charlotte had looked at Lily. Not with pity or condescension, but with something that looked almost like longing. He pulled out his worn wallet, where he kept a small school photo of Lily. Behind it was the first drawing she'd ever made of their family after her mother passed, just 2 stick figures then, holding hands beneath a sad-looking sun. Tonight's drawing had been so different, so full of hope and possibility. He wished he'd kept it, if only to remind himself not to dream too big. Back in her penthouse, Charlotte finally headed to her bedroom. She placed Lily's drawing on her nightstand, propped against her lamp where she could see it. The stick figures seemed to glow in the dim light, their crayon smiles full of promise. She changed into silk pajamas and slipped between expensive sheets, but sleep wouldn't come. The drawing caught her eye again. 3 simple figures, holding hands, connected. A family. Something she'd told herself she didn't need, didn't want. Something she'd convinced herself she was better off without. Yet now, alone in her perfect penthouse, all she could think about was Lily's small hand in hers, Ethan's gentle smile, and how for just a few hours tonight she'd felt what the morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Ethan's apartment as he made Lily's lunch. His movements were automatic, spreading peanut butter on wheat bread, cutting off the crusts just the way she liked it. His mind kept drifting back to the previous night, to Charlotte's unexpected warmth at the gala. "Daddy, can I wear my party dress to school?" Lily bounced into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. "Not today, sweetie. That's Mrs. Johnson's dress. We need to return it." Ethan tucked the sandwich into Lily's lunchbox. "Remember to thank her again when you see her." After dropping Lily at school, Ethan headed to work early. The building was quiet at this hour, peaceful before the rush of suits and clicking heels filled the halls. He liked it best this way, just him and his mop, no whispers or stares. Around noon, the usual bustle of the building changed. Something was different. Executives hurried through the halls, their faces tight with worry. Ethan kept his head down, focusing on polishing the brass railings near the elevator bank. "Emergency meeting," he heard someone mutter. "Budget cuts." Ethan's stomach clenched, but he pushed the worry aside. Budget meetings happened all the time in big companies. It didn't concern him. The afternoon grew tense. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Ethan could see Charlotte standing at the head of the table. Her face was masked in that professional coldness he remembered from before the gala. Gone was the woman who had danced with his daughter, replaced by the CEO who commanded respect. Numbers flashed on the screen behind her. Red figures, downward arrows. The board members nodded grimly, passing papers back and forth. Ethan moved on to vacuum the marketing department, trying to ignore the knot in his chest. He thought about Lily's college fund, still so small, despite his careful saving. About the medical bills, still unpaid from his wife's final months. At 3 o'clock, Charlotte's heels clicked across the marble lobby. She looked straight ahead, her face drawn. When she passed him, she didn't even glance his way. The memo came an hour later. 2. All janitorial staff. Subject: Department Review Notice. Status: Under review. Potential restructuring. Ethan read it twice, then 3 times. The words blurred together. Cost-saving measures and exploring external options jumped out at him. He knew what that meant. Outsourcing. Layoffs. He thought of the other janitors, Manuel, with 5 kids, Sarah putting herself through night school, old Joe who'd been here 20 years. What would they do? The notice crumpled in his fist as he shoved it into his pocket. Through the lobby's giant windows, he watched Charlotte's sleek black car pull up to the curb. Her driver jumped out to open her door. She emerged from the building like royalty, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. For a moment, just a moment, she paused. Her head turned slightly toward the building, toward where Ethan stood in shadow, but she didn't look up. She slipped into the car, and it pulled away smoothly into the afternoon traffic. Ethan's heart sank as he watched the car disappear. The woman who had seemed so human at the gala, who had made his daughter laugh and dream of having a mother again, she was gone. In her place was just another executive, making just another business decision. He pulled out his phone and looked at his background picture. Lily's gap-toothed smile beaming back at him. He'd promised her they would stay in this school district, that she wouldn't have to change schools again. The cleaning cart squeaked as he pushed it down the hall. The building suddenly felt colder, its marble floors and glass walls no longer familiar and comfortable, but alien and unwelcoming. He had to finish his shift. There were still floors to mop, trash to empty, surfaces to dust. But now each task felt heavy with uncertainty. Each stroke of the mop might be one of his last in this building. Each garbage bag might be closer to his final day. The notice in his pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floors he'd polished that morning. Soon he would need to pick up Lily from after-school care. She would ask about his day, and he would have to smile and say everything was fine. Because that's what fathers do. They carry the heavy things so their children don't have to. He looked out at the street where Charlotte's car had disappeared. The space between their worlds had never felt larger. Yesterday's hope now seemed foolish, like a child's drawing that had no place in reality. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Charlotte's office as Ethan stood before her desk, his hands clenched at his sides. The layoff notice felt like lead in his pocket. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below them, a reminder of how far apart their worlds really were. "You can't just sweep us away like dirt on your floors," Ethan said, his voice tight with emotion. "We're people, Miss Grant. People with families, with responsibilities." Charlotte sat perfectly straight in her leather chair, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Walker, this is a business decision. The board—" "The board?" Ethan interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. "What about basic human decency? After everything, after the gala." That was different. Charlotte's fingers tapped against her desk. "This isn't personal." "Isn't it?" Ethan stepped forward. "You showed us kindness. You made Lily believe—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Charlotte stood, her heels clicking on the polished floor as she walked to the window. "I have a responsibility to this company, Mr. Walker, to hundreds of employees. And I have a responsibility to my daughter," Ethan countered. "How am I supposed to—" The door creaked open, and both adults turned. Lily stood in the doorway, wearing her backpack and holding a piece of paper. She'd been waiting in the break room while Ethan worked, as usual. "Miss Charlotte!" Lily rushed in, oblivious to the tension. She waved the paper excitedly. "Look what I got!" Charlotte's professional mask cracked slightly as Lily approached. She knelt down, her expensive suit wrinkling. "What do you have there, sweetheart?" "It's for the school play. I'm going to be a tree." Lily thrust the paper forward. "See? Next Friday night. Will you come, please?" The silence that followed felt heavy. Ethan watched Charlotte's face, saw the conflict there. She glanced up at him, then back to Lily's hopeful expression. "Lily," Ethan started. "Miss Charlotte is very busy." "I'll be there," Charlotte said softly, surprising them both. She smoothed Lily's hair with a gentle hand. "What time does it start?" 7 o'clock, Lily beamed. "I have the best tree costume ever. Daddy helped me make it from cardboard and real leaves." Charlotte stood, straightening her suit jacket. Her eyes met Ethan's, and something unspoken passed between them. "I wouldn't miss it," she said, though her voice held a note of uncertainty. Lily hugged Charlotte's legs impulsively. Thank you. Wait till I tell my teacher." Ethan watched as Charlotte's hand hesitated before resting on Lily's head. The CEO's usual commanding presence seemed to soften, her sharp edges blurring. "Lily," Ethan said gently, "why don't you go back to the break room? I need to finish talking with Miss Charlotte." Once Lily had skipped out, the tension returned. Charlotte moved back behind her desk, as if seeking the safety of her professional barrier. "Mr. Walker," she began. "Don't," Ethan cut her off. "Don't make promises to her you can't keep." "I meant what I said. I'll be at her play. And then what? You'll fire her father the next day?" Ethan's voice was quiet but intense. "You can't have it both ways, Miss Grant. You can't be the caring friend and the cold executive at the same time." Charlotte sank into her chair, looking suddenly tired. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." Ethan pulled the layoff notice from his pocket and placed it on her desk. "You just have to decide what kind of person you want to be." He turned to leave, but Charlotte's voice stopped him. "Ethan, wait." He paused at the door, not turning around. 7 o'clock, she said softly. "I'll be there." Ethan nodded once and left, his emotions churning. In the elevator down to the maintenance level, he leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. The image of Charlotte kneeling to talk to Lily, of her gentle touch on his daughter's hair, played in his mind. She wasn't just his boss anymore, wasn't just the untouchable CEO in the corner office. She was becoming something else, someone who made Lily smile, someone who could hurt them both far deeper than a simple pink slip ever could. The elevator dinged, and Ethan pushed himself off the wall. He had rounds to make, floors to clean. But his mind stayed upstairs in that corner office, where the lines between professional and personal had begun to blur beyond recognition. Charlotte Grant was becoming entangled in their lives, and Ethan wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. In the break room, Lily sat humming as she colored another picture. Ethan watched her from the doorway, his heart heavy. She was drawing 3 figures again: a man, a little girl, and a tall woman in high heels. A family. His daughter's innocent hopes were creating bonds that would make the inevitable separation even more painful. But looking at Lily's happy face as she drew, Ethan couldn't bring himself to discourage her dreams. Not yet. Not when there was still a chance, however small, that Charlotte might prove to be more than just another executive making tough decisions. The school play invitation hung between them now, a test of sorts. Would she choose to be the CEO who cut costs, or the woman who made a little girl believe in fairy tales? Ethan picked up his mop and bucket, heading out to start his rounds. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him with each step. Charlotte Grant had become a variable he couldn't predict, a force that could either heal or shatter the fragile world he'd built for his daughter. And, somehow, that scared him more than any layoff notice ever could. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents filed in, finding their seats among the metal folding chairs. Construction paper stars and painted cardboard trees decorated the small stage, transforming it into an enchanted forest for the third-grade play. Ethan sat stiffly in his pressed work shirt, scanning the crowd nervously. "Is she coming, Daddy?" Lily whispered from backstage, her fairy wings slightly crooked. She wore a glittery costume that their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had helped modify from a thrift store dress. "I'm sure she'll be here, sweetheart," Ethan said, trying to sound confident. But his stomach churned with doubt. Charlotte was a CEO with countless responsibilities. A children's play probably ranked low on her priority list. Just then, the auditorium doors swung open. Charlotte Grant strode in, looking slightly out of place in her elegant business suit. Several parents turned to stare as she made her way down the aisle, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. "You came!" Lily squealed. Forgetting the no peeking from backstage rule, Charlotte's face softened as she spotted them. "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss it for anything." She settled into the empty seat beside Ethan, smoothing her skirt. "I hope I'm not late." "Right on time," Ethan managed, hyper-aware of her shoulder barely brushing his. The lights dimmed, and the play began. Lily danced across the stage with the other fairy children, her wings catching the spotlight. Though she stumbled once during her solo line, her face beamed with joy. Ethan found himself glancing sideways at Charlotte throughout the performance. She leaned forward in her seat, completely absorbed, laughing at all the right moments. When Lily took her final bow, Charlotte was the first to stand, applauding enthusiastically. "She was wonderful," she whispered to Ethan, her eyes bright. After the play, Lily ran to them, still wearing her costume, face flushed with excitement. "Did you see me? Did you like my fairy dance?" "You were the most magical fairy in the whole forest," Charlotte said, kneeling to straighten Lily's wings. "Can we get ice cream?" Lily asked hopefully. "Please, Daddy? Please, Charlotte?" Before Ethan could make excuses about it being a school night, Charlotte spoke up. "Actually, I know a great little diner just around the corner. They make the best hot chocolate in the city." And somehow, 20 minutes later, they found themselves squeezed into a worn leather booth at Joe's Diner. The fluorescent lights cast a warm glow over the chrome fixtures, and the smell of coffee and grilled onions filled the air. Lily sat between them, sipping hot chocolate topped with a mountain of whipped cream. "And then, when Tommy forgot his lines, I helped him remember." Lily giggled, chocolate mustache decorating her upper lip. "You were a very good friend," Charlotte said, dabbing at Lily's face with a napkin. The gesture was so maternal, so natural, that it made Ethan's chest ache. They shared a plate of French fries, talking and laughing as if they'd done this 100 times before. Charlotte told stories about her own disastrous elementary school performances. Ethan found himself relaxing, trading childhood memories, forgetting for a moment about social barriers and corporate hierarchies. "Look, Daddy!" Lily held up her paper placemat where she'd drawn another family portrait with the diner's crayons. "That's us having hot chocolate together?" Charlotte leaned closer to see, her shoulder pressing against Ethan's. Her perfume smelled like vanilla and something expensive he couldn't name. For one perfect moment, they were just a family sharing dessert on a Tuesday night. The spell broke when Charlotte's phone buzzed. She checked it quickly, her CEO mask slipping back into place. "I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." They said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Lily hugging Charlotte's legs tightly. "Thank you for coming to my play," she mumbled into Charlotte's silk blouse. "Thank you for inviting me, sweetheart." Charlotte's voice was soft as she stroked Lily's hair. The drive home was quiet, Lily dozing in the back seat, still wearing her fairy wings. Ethan carried her up to their apartment, tucked her into bed with her favorite stuffed bunny, Mr. Hoppy. It wasn't until he settled at the kitchen table with his laptop that he saw the email from HR. His hands shook slightly as he clicked to open it. "Dear Mr. Walker, this letter serves as formal notification that due to corporate restructuring, all in-house janitorial positions will be terminated effective the end of this month." The words blurred together as he read. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to figure out how to keep their apartment, pay for Lily's after-school care, find a new job. 2 weeks before he had to tell his daughter they were losing everything they'd built here, including their tentative connection with Charlotte. Now, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the water stains on the ceiling. Through the thin wall, he could hear Lily's soft breathing from her room, peaceful and untroubled. Mr. Hoppy was clutched tightly in her arms, one ear slightly ragged from years of love. The night felt endless as his mind raced with calculations and worries. How many months could they survive on his savings? Would any other buildings be hiring janitors? Could he afford to move them to a cheaper neighborhood? Each question led to another, none with easy answers. He turned his head to look at the digital clock. 2:47 a.m. In just a few hours, he would have to wake up, pack Lily's lunch, send her to school with a smile, all while carrying the weight of their uncertain future. And somehow, he would have to find the words to tell her that their fairy tale, ending with Charlotte, might have to remain just that, a fairy tale. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Ethan pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. It was nearly midnight, and the skyscraper had fallen quiet except for the soft swoosh of his mop against the polished floors. His shoulders felt heavy with the weight of the termination notice burning a hole in his pocket. He paused near the water cooler, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. The night shift used to be peaceful, just him and his thoughts. But now every shadow reminded him of the uncertainty ahead. How many more nights would he walk these halls? How would he keep a roof over Lily's head? Voices drifted from the boardroom, making him freeze. The double doors were closed, but through the frosted glass, he could make out several silhouettes. One of them was unmistakably Charlotte's, her straight-backed posture as distinctive as a fingerprint. "This is non-negotiable, Miss Grant." A man's voice, sharp with authority. "The numbers don't lie." "With all due respect, Mr. Richardson." Charlotte's voice was controlled but tense. "These aren't just numbers we're discussing. These are people families." Ethan knew he shouldn't eavesdrop, but his feet wouldn't move. He pretended to clean the nearby window, his heart pounding. "People?" Another voice scoffed. "They're expendable costs. The janitorial staff alone costs us nearly $500,000 annually. Outsourcing will cut that by 60%. And what about their children?" Charlotte's voice cracked slightly. "Their mortgages? Their medical bills? Since when did Charlotte Grant become a bleeding heart?" Someone laughed coldly. "Need I remind you that your position as CEO depends on making tough decisions?" "Is that a threat, James?" Charlotte's tone could have frozen fire. "It's a reality check. The board is watching you closely. Your recent involvement with certain staff members hasn't gone unnoticed." Ethan's hand tightened around his mop handle. They were talking about him, about Lily. "My personal life is not up for discussion," Charlotte snapped. "It is when it affects company decisions. You've worked 15 years to reach this position, Charlotte. Are you really willing to throw it all away for a janitor and his daughter?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's chest felt tight, each breath a struggle. He shouldn't be hearing this. He didn't want to hear this. "The meeting is adjourned," Charlotte said finally, her voice distant and professional once more. "I'll have my final decision by morning." Footsteps approached the door. Ethan quickly pushed his cart around the corner, his hands trembling slightly. One by one, board members filed out, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. None of them spared him a glance as they passed. He was invisible to them, just another expendable cost. When the hallway cleared, Ethan risked a look back toward the boardroom. Through the glass walls of her adjoining office, he could see Charlotte. She stood at her floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the city lights. Her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and a bowed head. One hand pressed against the glass as if seeking support. For a moment, she looked as lost as he felt. The sight struck him harder than he expected. He'd seen Charlotte Grant in many ways over the past weeks. Powerful, stern, surprisingly gentle with Lily, even vulnerable during quiet moments, but he'd never seen her defeated. She turned slightly, and Ethan caught a glimpse of her face reflected in the glass. The mask of the untouchable CEO had cracked, revealing something raw and painful underneath. She looked like someone forced to choose between two impossible options, knowing that either choice would cost her dearly. Ethan thought of Lily's drawing, still proudly displayed on their refrigerator at home. In her innocent wisdom, his daughter had seen something in Charlotte that the rest of the world missed, not just the Ice Queen CEO, but a woman capable of warmth, of love, of being part of a family. Now that woman stood alone in her glass tower, trapped between her heart and her duty, between the person she'd become and the person she might want to be. Ethan stepped back, feeling like an intruder. He had his own duties to attend to, his own battles to fight. Tomorrow, he would start looking for new jobs, preparing for the worst. He would be strong for Lily, as he'd always been. But as he pushed his cart toward the elevator, the image of Charlotte's reflection stayed with him. A solitary figure framed against the city lights, bearing the weight of choices that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others. The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, leaving Charlotte alone in her office, surrounded by the cold comfort of success and the echoing emptiness of power. The small pizza parlor buzzed with the dinner crowd's chatter. Red and white checkered tablecloths covered worn wooden tables, and the warm aroma of melted cheese and tomato sauce filled the air. In their corner booth, Charlotte Grant looked surprisingly at home, despite her designer blazer and perfectly styled hair. "I can't remember the last time I had pizza," Charlotte admitted, delicately picking up a slice as strings of cheese stretched between the pan and her plate. Lily bounced in her seat next to Charlotte, her legs swinging beneath the table. "Daddy and I have pizza every Friday. It's our special thing." Ethan watched from across the booth as Charlotte's professional facade continued to crack. Her usual boardroom presence had softened into something warmer, more genuine. When Lily insisted on showing Charlotte how to fold her slice the right way, Charlotte actually listened, letting the 7-year-old guide her hands. "Like this?" Charlotte asked, attempting to copy Lily's technique. No, Lily giggled. "You have to make it skinnier, like a taco." The sight of Charlotte Grant, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, taking pizza-eating lessons from his daughter, made Ethan's heart twist in unexpected ways. She'd suggested they grab dinner after running into them at the grocery store, and somehow they'd ended up here, at Tony's Pizza Palace, instead of the upscale restaurants she usually frequented. "Much better," Lily declared as Charlotte successfully folded her slice. "Now take a big bite." Charlotte did as instructed, and a drop of sauce escaped, landing on her cream-colored blazer. Lily's eyes went wide with horror. "Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you messy." Lily's lower lip trembled. Ethan tensed, ready to apologize, but before he could speak, Charlotte did something completely unexpected. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle or forced smile, but a genuine, melodious laugh that lit up her whole face. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," Charlotte said, still grinning as she dabbed at the spot with a napkin. "This blazer has survived board meetings and coffee spills. A little pizza sauce won't hurt it." Lily relaxed, relief washing over her face. "Really? You're not mad?" "Not even a little bit," Charlotte assured her, giving Lily a playful bump with her shoulder. "Besides, now I'll always remember our pizza lesson when I wear it." Ethan couldn't help but stare. This was not the same woman who'd frozen at Lily's drawing in the boardroom. The Charlotte before him now had shed her corporate armor, revealing someone warm and, surprisingly, playful. Her perfectly styled hair had loosened slightly, a few strands falling around her face as she leaned in to help Lily with a particularly stretchy piece of cheese. "Want to hear a secret?" Charlotte whispered to Lily, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "This is the most fun I've had at dinner in years." "Better than fancy restaurants?" Lily asked. "Much better. Those places don't even have paper placemats you can draw on." As if to prove her point, Charlotte picked up one of Lily's crayons and began doodling alongside her. Ethan watched as they filled the white paper with colorful scribbles, Charlotte following Lily's creative direction with complete abandon. The evening passed too quickly, filled with more laughter than Ethan could remember hearing in their usual Friday night dinners. Charlotte listened intently to Lily's stories about school, asked questions about her favorite subjects, and even shared a few silly stories from her own childhood. When the last slice had been eaten and the crayons were scattered across their table, Charlotte insisted on paying, waving away Ethan's protests with a gentle smile. "Please," she said softly, "let me have this." The drive home in Charlotte's luxury car was quiet but comfortable. Lily dozed in the back seat, clutching her takeout box of leftover pizza. Ethan caught Charlotte glancing in the rearview mirror at Lily's sleeping form, a tender expression on her face. They pulled up to Ethan's apartment building, the brick structure modest but well-maintained. Charlotte turned off the engine but made no move to leave as Ethan gathered Lily into his arms. "Thank you for dinner," he said quietly through the passenger window. "And for everything." Charlotte nodded, her eyes following them as they made their way to the building's entrance. Ethan shifted Lily's weight, fishing for his keys, when he heard Charlotte's car door open and close softly. He turned to see her standing in the glow of the streetlight, watching them with an expression that made his chest ache. As Ethan started up the concrete steps, Lily still sleeping against his shoulder, he heard Charlotte's whispered words carried on the evening breeze. "I wish I belonged there." He paused, but when he looked back, she was already sliding back into her car, the moment as fragile as a soap bubble floating away on the wind. The small pizza parlor buzzed with the dinner crowd's chatter. Red and white checkered tablecloths covered worn wooden tables, and the warm aroma of melting cheese filled the air. In a corner booth, Charlotte Grant sat across from Ethan and Lily, her tailored blazer looking out of place among the casual diners. "Can I get extra cheese on mine?" Lily asked, bouncing in her seat. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched other families' pizzas arrive at nearby tables. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Sweetheart, maybe we should stick to—" "Of course you can," Charlotte cut in, smiling warmly at Lily. "Get whatever toppings you'd like." The waitress approached their table, her pen poised over her notepad. Charlotte ordered a small margarita pizza, while Lily enthusiastically requested her extra cheese creation with pepperoni. Ethan simply asked for a plain slice, his voice quiet. "Make that a large pizza for him," Charlotte amended, catching Ethan's eye. "You'll want leftovers for lunch tomorrow." Ethan's cheeks flushed. "You don't have to—" "I want to," Charlotte said firmly, but her voice was gentle. "Please." As they waited for their food, Lily pulled out her worn coloring book and a handful of broken crayons from her backpack. Charlotte watched as the little girl carefully selected colors, making sure to stay within the lines of a unicorn picture. "Those are beautiful colors you're choosing," Charlotte commented, leaning closer to see. "These are my favorite crayons," Lily explained proudly. "Even though they're broken, they still work good. Daddy showed me how to peel the paper back when they get too short." Charlotte glanced at Ethan, who was studying the table's surface intently. She noticed his calloused hands, the slight fraying at his shirt cuffs, the scuffed shoes beneath the table. Each detail told a story of careful economy, of making things last. Their pizzas arrived, steam rising from the perfectly melted cheese. Lily's eyes widened at the size of her father's pizza. "Wow, Daddy, that's huge!" Ethan managed a small smile, cutting Lily's pizza into smaller pieces. Charlotte watched as he made sure his daughter had napkins, checked that her drink wasn't too close to the edge of the table, all the small gestures of a devoted father. After dinner, Charlotte insisted on driving them home. The contrast between her luxury car and their destination grew sharper as they left the gleaming downtown area behind. They turned onto streets with fewer streetlights, past discount stores with bars on their windows. "This is our street," Lily announced as they approached a tired-looking apartment complex. Paint peeled from the exterior walls and a few windows showed repairs made with duct tape. Charlotte parked, and Lily jumped out, racing toward a small patch of grass where a few dandelions grew through cracks in the concrete. "Look, Charlotte, these are my flowers!" "They're lovely," Charlotte said, following Lily while Ethan locked the car. She watched as Lily carefully picked one, holding it up like a precious gem. "Want to see my room?" Lily asked hopefully. "I have more drawings to show you." Ethan hesitated, but Charlotte's genuine smile made him relent. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, the elevator perpetually out of order. The hallway carpet was worn thin, and somewhere, a baby was crying. Their apartment was small but meticulously clean. Charlotte noticed immediately how Ethan had tried to make it cheerful for Lily. Paper butterflies cut from old magazines decorated one wall. A bookshelf held library books arranged by color. A small table by the window served as both dining area and homework station. Lily pulled Charlotte to her room, barely bigger than a closet. The twin bed wore mismatched sheets, but they were neatly made. A cardboard box painted with flowers served as a toy box. On the wall hung drawings, dozens of them, creating a gallery of a child's imagination. "This is my favorite," Lily said, pointing to a crayon drawing of 3 figures. "It's you and me and Daddy at the park." Charlotte's throat tightened. She recognized herself in the tall figure wearing what looked like a crown, her usual business updo, she realized. In the picture, she was holding hands with both Lily and Ethan. "It's beautiful," she managed to say. Ethan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Lily, it's getting late. Time to get ready for bed. Can Charlotte read me a story? Please?" Before either adult could respond, Lily had already pulled a battered copy of Goodnight Moon from her shelf. The corners were soft with use, the spine held together with clear tape. "Just one story," Ethan conceded. Charlotte sat on the edge of Lily's bed, the little girl snuggling close as she opened the book. Her designer dress crinkled against Lily's worn pajamas, but she didn't care. As she read, she noticed small pencil marks on the wall beside the bed. Lily's height measurements, dated carefully in Ethan's neat handwriting. After the story, Lily hugged Charlotte tightly. "Good night," she whispered. "I'm glad you came to see where we live." Ethan walked Charlotte to her car, the night air cool around them. The street light flickered, casting uncertain shadows. "Thank you for dinner," he said quietly. "And for being kind to Lily." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She doesn't have many people in her life who—" "She has you," Charlotte said softly. "That's worth more than anything." Their eyes met for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Then Ethan stepped back, nodding goodbye. Charlotte slid into her car, the leather seats suddenly feeling too soft, too luxurious. Through her windshield, she watched Ethan disappear into the building. The security guard in her building's lobby probably earned more than Ethan did cleaning entire floors. Her dinner tonight had cost more than their weekly grocery budget. She started the engine, but her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The apartment building stood before her, its windows like tired eyes. Somewhere up there, Lily was probably already asleep, dreaming of unicorns and pizza, and maybe even Charlotte herself. Somewhere up there, Ethan was probably counting pennies, worrying about tomorrow, loving his daughter with everything he had. Charlotte put the car in drive, but her heart stayed behind, caught between 2 worlds that weren't supposed to meet. As she pulled away, her rearview mirror showed the building growing smaller, its cracks and peeling paint softened by distance and darkness. But she couldn't unsee what she'd witnessed. The careful pride, the quiet dignity, the love that filled those small rooms more completely than any furniture ever could. The grand foyer of Charlotte's mansion echoed with Christmas music and the pitter-patter of Lily's excited footsteps. Usually cold and pristine, tonight the space radiated warmth from dozens of twinkling lights. The scent of freshly baked gingerbread cookies wafted through the halls, replacing the usual sterile emptiness. "This tree is bigger than our whole apartment," Lily exclaimed, her neck craning back to see the top of the massive pine that stretched toward the vaulted ceiling. Charlotte smiled, setting down a box of ornaments. She had traded her usual power suit for a soft cream sweater and jeans, a sight that still surprised Ethan. "Well, we better get started decorating it then, shouldn't we?" Ethan stood awkwardly near the doorway, his worn work boots leaving slight marks on the marble floor. "Are you sure you want us touching your fancy decorations?" "They're just things, Ethan," Charlotte said softly. "What matters is who you share them with." Lily didn't wait for further permission. She dove into a box of glass ornaments, carefully lifting each one as if it were made of gold. "Look, Daddy, this one's shaped like a star." The next hour passed in a blur of tinsel and lights. Charlotte taught Lily how to hang ornaments on the strongest branches, while Ethan handled the higher sections. Their laughter mingled with the Christmas carols playing softly in the background. Every few minutes, the timer in the kitchen would ding, and Charlotte would rush to pull out another batch of cookies. "I've never baked so much in my life," she admitted, returning with a plate of slightly crooked gingerbread men. "The cook usually handles all of this, but I sent everyone home for the evening. I wanted to do this myself." Ethan noticed the flour dusting her cheek but didn't mention it. Instead, he watched as she helped Lily decorate a cookie with white icing. Charlotte's usually steady hands trembled slightly as she drew a smile on the gingerbread man's face. "There," she said, presenting it to Lily. "What do you think?" "It's perfect," Lily declared, taking a big bite. "Just like a real family Christmas." The word family hung in the air between them. Charlotte's eyes met Ethan's for a brief moment before she quickly looked away, busying herself with straightening already perfect ornaments. As the evening wore on, they moved to the living room, where a fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace. Charlotte had hung 3 stockings on the mantel earlier, but Lily noticed something was missing. "They need names," she announced, pulling crayons from her ever-present backpack. With careful concentration, she wrote "Daddy" on the first stocking, then her own name on the second. She paused at the third, looking up at Charlotte with those innocent eyes that seemed to see right through to the soul. "Can I write Mommy on yours?" Lily asked softly. The room grew still. Even the crackling fire seemed to quiet. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat as she looked at Ethan, uncertainty written across her face. Ethan started to intervene. "Lily, honey, maybe we shouldn't," but before he could finish, Charlotte knelt beside Lily, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart, you can write that." Lily carefully printed the letters, her tongue sticking out in concentration. When she finished, she stepped back proudly. "Now it's perfect." Charlotte stared at the stocking, her hand covering her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks, catching the firelight. She tried to wipe them away quickly, but more kept coming. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her composure crumbling. I never thought." She looked at the stockings. Daddy, Lily, Mommy, all hanging together as if they belonged that way. "I never thought I could have this, any of this." Ethan moved closer, concern etched on his face. "Charlotte, my whole life," she continued, her voice breaking, "I've been chasing success, thinking it would fill this emptiness inside me. But being here, with you both." She gestured around the room, at the cookies, the tree, the stockings. "For the first time, I feel like I belong somewhere, like I'm home." Lily wrapped her arms around Charlotte's waist, and Charlotte held her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The little girl who had started all of this with a simple crayon drawing now stood in the middle of its unfolding, completely unaware of the profound impact she'd had on both adults' lives. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls as they sat together on the plush carpet. Lily curled up with her head in Charlotte's lap, while Charlotte absently stroked her hair. The Christmas lights twinkled, and outside, snow began to fall softly against the windows. "Thank you," Charlotte whispered to Ethan, "for sharing her with me, for sharing this." Ethan watched them together, the powerful CEO and his daughter, and saw only 2 people who had somehow found exactly what they needed in each other. Charlotte's hand rested on the carpet between them, and for a moment he felt an overwhelming urge to take it in his own. Charlotte must have felt the same pull, because she glanced down at their nearly touching hands. The air grew thick with unspoken words and possibilities. Slowly she began to reach for his hand, but then hesitated. The moment stretched between them like a delicate thread, full of promise but too fragile to test. Finally, she drew her hand back, returning it to Lily's hair. The next morning, Charlotte's heels clicked against the marble floor of the executive level. The sound echoed through the empty hallway, each step heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. She paused at the mahogany double doors of the boardroom, straightening her blazer and taking a deep breath. Inside, the board members sat in their usual formation around the long table. Their faces were stern, documents spread before them like weapons ready for battle. Thomas Reed, the head of the board, gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. "Charlotte, please sit." His voice carried none of its usual warmth. "We need to discuss the janitorial department situation." She settled into her chair, maintaining her practiced neutral expression. "I've been reviewing alternative solutions." "The numbers don't lie," Barbara Chen, the CFO, interrupted. She slid a spreadsheet across the polished surface. "Outsourcing would save us nearly $2 million annually. The shareholders are getting restless." Charlotte glanced at the figures, though she'd memorized them days ago. "The human cost is not our primary concern," Thomas cut in, his gray eyes narrowed. "You're a CEO, Charlotte, not a social worker. Your job is to maximize profits and shareholder value." The room felt suddenly airless. Charlotte's fingers tightened around her pen. "These are people's livelihoods we're discussing. Families. And your position as CEO is meant to protect thousands of other jobs," Barbara reminded her. "One department cannot jeopardize the entire company's future." Charlotte thought of Lily's drawing, still tucked away in her desk drawer, of Ethan's quiet dignity as he worked late into the night, of the Christmas decorations they'd hung together, making her empty mansion feel like a home for the first time. "We've been patient," Thomas continued, his tone growing harder. "But the board is unanimous. Either you sign off on the outsourcing today, or we'll be forced to reconsider your position." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Charlotte's chest tightened as memories of her own childhood flashed through her mind. The constant moves as her single mother chased work, the shame of worn-out clothes, the longing for stability. "You've built an impressive career, Charlotte," Barbara said, softer now. "Don't throw it away over misplaced sentiment." Charlotte's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the document. The words blurred before her eyes. "Termination of internal janitorial services." Her pen felt like lead as she held it above the signature line. "Think of the bigger picture," Thomas urged. "This is business." She thought of Lily's smile when she helped with homework, of Ethan's gentle way with his daughter, his unwavering work ethic, of the family she'd begun to imagine possible. But she also thought of her corner office, earned through years of sacrifice, of the respect she'd fought so hard to gain in a male-dominated industry, of the security she'd never had as a child. The pen scratched across paper. Her signature looked foreign to her own eyes. "Excellent decision," Thomas said, gathering the papers. "HR will send out the notifications this afternoon." The board members filed out, leaving Charlotte alone in the vast room. She stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall. The city stretched below, a maze of towers and streets where somewhere Ethan and Lily were going about their day, not knowing how she'd just altered their future. Her assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "The HR department has sent the termination notices for your final review." Charlotte returned to her desk, opening her laptop. The email was clinical, professional, everything she'd trained herself to be. With numb fingers she clicked, "Approve." Across the building, Ethan was finishing his evening rounds when his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, expecting another sweet message from Lily about homework or dinner plans. Instead, the subject line made his heart stop. "Notice of position termination." He sank into the break room chair, the same chair where Lily had drawn that picture weeks ago, the same chair where he'd started to believe in second chances. The words on his screen blurred as reality crashed in. "We regret to inform you. Effective end of month. Outsourcing decision. Severance package." The phone slipped from his fingers onto the table. Through the window, he could see Charlotte's office light still burning bright against the darkening sky. He thought of her laugh during Christmas decorating, the way she'd looked at him by the fire, how natural she'd seemed with Lily. All an illusion, it seemed. In the end, he was just another number on a spreadsheet, another cost to be cut. And now, he had to go home and figure out how to tell his daughter they were losing not just his job, but the woman they'd both begun to love. Thomas Reed's sharp gaze followed Charlotte as she settled into her chair. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows did nothing to warm the chill in the room. "The numbers don't lie, Charlotte," Thomas said, sliding a thick report across the polished table. "Your alternative proposals are inadequate." Charlotte's fingers curled around the edge of her chair. Just yesterday, she'd been decorating Christmas cookies with Lily, the little girl's laughter filling her usually empty home. Now, that warmth felt like a distant dream. "We've been through this," Charlotte began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If we adjust the executive bonuses and—" "Absolutely not, Barbara Chen," another board member cut in. Her pearl necklace gleamed as she shook her head. "The shareholders would never approve." Charlotte looked around the table, at the faces she'd known for years. These were people who'd supported her rise to CEO, who'd praised her ruthless efficiency. Now their expectations felt like a noose around her neck. "Then, give me more time," Charlotte pleaded, hating how weak she sounded. "There must be another way." Thomas leaned forward, his silver hair catching the light. "Charlotte, you've changed. This hesitation isn't like you. Is this about the janitor?" Charlotte flinched. She thought of Ethan's quiet dignity, of Lily's innocent drawings, of the way they'd made her feel human again. "This is about doing what's right," she said firmly. "What's right is protecting this company," Thomas replied. He pulled out a document and placed it before her. "Sign the outsourcing order now, or we'll be forced to reevaluate your position." Charlotte's hand trembled as she reached for the pen. The weight of it felt like lead in her grip. With each stroke of her signature, she felt pieces of her heart crack. Later that afternoon, Charlotte sat in her office, staring at her phone. She'd watched through her window as Ethan received the email. Saw how his shoulders had slumped, how he'd buried his face in his hands. She dialed his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. "Ethan," she whispered into the phone. "Please pick up." Nothing. She dialed a 3rd time, her desperation growing. The familiar rings mocked her before cutting to voicemail again. Charlotte paced her office, her reflection fragmenting across the glass walls. She tried a 4th time, a 5th. Finally, she left a message, her voice cracking with emotion. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I didn't want this. I fought for you, for everyone. But the board." She paused, realizing how hollow her excuses sounded. "I know I've hurt you. And Lily. Oh God, Lily, I never meant to." A sob caught in her throat. "Please call me back. Please." In his small apartment across town, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone as it lit up with Charlotte's calls. Each time her name flashed on the screen, it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. Lily was in her room, humming as she worked on another drawing. She didn't know yet. How could he tell her? How could he explain that the woman she'd begun to see as a mother had just destroyed their lives? His phone buzzed again. Charlotte's voicemail notification appeared. Ethan picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. He thought of the Christmas decorations at her mansion, of the way she'd looked at him by the fire. He thought of how she'd played with Lily, how she'd seemed to transform from the Ice Queen CEO into someone warm and real. But then he remembered the cold corporate email announcing the termination of all janitorial staff, how it had arrived just hours after they'd shared hot chocolate and dreams of a future together. The betrayal burned fresh in his throat. Without listening to the message, he pressed delete. The notification disappeared, taking with it the last thread of hope he'd been clinging to. In the background, he could hear Lily singing a Christmas carol she'd learned from Charlotte. The sound made his heart ache. He'd have to tell her soon that they needed to move, find work in another city. That Charlotte wouldn't be coming around anymore. His phone lit up again. Charlotte's name appeared one more time. Ethan turned the phone face down on the table and walked away, leaving her call unanswered in the growing darkness of the winter evening. Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's small bed, his heart heavy as lead. The pink unicorn nightlight cast soft shadows on the wall, making the moment feel even more surreal. Lily clutched Mr. Whiskers, her stuffed rabbit, tight against her chest. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but she wasn't done asking questions. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, barely a whisper. "Are we going to move away?" Ethan smoothed her tangled hair, buying time before he had to answer. The bedroom felt cramped with all their emotions filling it up. Cardboard boxes were already stacked in the corner. He'd started packing that afternoon while Lily was at school. "Maybe, sweetheart." He tried to keep his voice steady. "I need to find new work, and that might mean going somewhere else." Lily's bottom lip trembled. "But what about my school? And Miss Thompson? And—" She hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. "What about Charlotte?" The name hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd been trying not to think about Charlotte all day, trying to forget the warmth of her smile, the way she'd made them feel like they belonged somewhere special. "Sometimes," he started, clearing his throat when his voice cracked. "Sometimes we have to make hard changes, even when we don't want to." "But she was going to be my mommy," Lily burst out, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "She helped me with my math homework and made funny faces when I got scared at the dentist, and—" She hiccuped through her sobs. "She smells like cookies and flowers, and she gives the best hugs after yours, Daddy." Ethan pulled Lily into his lap, letting her cry against his shirt. His own eyes burned, but he blinked back the tears. He had to be strong for her. "I know, baby. I know." He rocked her gently, like he used to when she was smaller. The motion still soothed her, even now. When her sobs quieted to sniffles, Lily pulled back and looked up at him with those big brown eyes that could melt stone. "Can I see her? Just one more time. Please, Daddy." His first instinct was to say no. The hurt was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. But looking at his daughter's pleading face, he remembered how much Charlotte had come to mean to her. Maybe he was angry, but Lily deserved a chance to say goodbye. "What would you want to say to her?" he asked softly. Lily wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I want to give her the picture I made in art class today. And," she hesitated, picking at a loose thread on Mr. Whiskers' ear, "I want to tell her thank you for being like a mommy, even if it was just for a little while." Ethan's chest tightened. Sometimes Lily's wisdom struck him speechless, how she could see past hurt to gratitude, how she could treasure what they'd had instead of being bitter about what they'd lost. "And maybe," Lily added hopefully, "maybe she could read me one more story, like she did at Christmas?" The memory of that night flooded back. Charlotte sitting in her elegant living room, reading The Polar Express, with different voices for each character. Lily giggling at her silly conductor impression. How natural it had felt. How right. Ethan took a deep breath. "Okay, sweetheart, we can try to see her one more time." Lily's face lit up like a sunrise. "Really? Really?" He managed a small smile. "But I can't promise anything. She might be busy, or—" "She won't be too busy," Lily said with complete conviction. "She always says, 'I'm more important than meetings.'" The simple faith in her voice made his throat tight again. He helped Lily settle back under her covers, tucking Mr. Whiskers in beside her. "Tomorrow after school," he said, "we can try to catch her at the office. But just for a little while, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay, Daddy." She yawned, the emotional evening finally catching up with her. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course." He stroked her hair as her eyes started to drift closed. "Daddy?" Her voice was already fuzzy with sleep. "Yes, baby? I love you. Even if we have to move far away. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." He sat there in the dim light, watching his daughter's breathing even out, marveling at her resilience. Even as their world shifted beneath their feet, she found ways to hope, to love, to say goodbye with grace. Tomorrow would be hard. Seeing Charlotte again would hurt like hell. But he'd do it for Lily, because that's what parents did. They put their children's needs before their own wounded hearts. As if sensing his thoughts, Lily mumbled something in her sleep and hugged Mr. Whiskers closer. Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead, then quietly stood up. He paused in the doorway, looking back at his sleeping daughter, surrounded by her stuffed animals and fairy lights. Whatever came next, wherever they ended up, they'd face it together. They always had. The morning sun glinted off the steel and glass tower as Ethan held Lily's small hand. His footsteps felt heavy against the polished marble floor of the lobby, floors he'd cleaned countless times before. The security guard nodded at them sympathetically, already aware of the layoffs. "Remember, sweetheart," Ethan said softly, kneeling to Lily's level. "This is just to say goodbye, okay?" Lily nodded, but her lower lip trembled. She wore her favorite blue dress, the one Charlotte had helped her pick out at the store. The memory made Ethan's jaw clench. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. Lily pressed her face against the glass, watching the city shrink below them. Ethan's reflection stared back at him, tired eyes, wrinkled shirt, the face of a man who'd lost more than just a job. Charlotte's assistant looked up as they approached her desk. "Oh," she said, her expression softening. "Miss Grant is in her office. She's been expecting you." Through the glass walls, Ethan could see Charlotte standing at her window, her back rigid in her tailored suit. She turned at the sound of the door opening, and for a brief moment, her professional mask slipped. "Mommy Charlotte." Lily broke free from Ethan's grip and ran across the office. Charlotte dropped to her knees, catching Lily in her arms. Her perfectly styled hair fell forward as she held the little girl close. "Oh, sweetie," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've missed you so much." Lily's small shoulders shook with sobs. "Daddy says we have to move away. I don't want to go." Charlotte looked up at Ethan over Lily's head, her eyes glistening. "Please," she said. "Can we talk?" Ethan's hands clenched in his pockets. "Lily, honey, why don't you show Miss Grant's assistant your new drawing while we talk?" Once Lily reluctantly left the office, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. Charlotte stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "Ethan, I need you to understand," she began, her usual confidence wavering. "The board gave me an ultimatum. Either cut costs dramatically or face a complete restructuring that would have cost hundreds more jobs." "Save it," Ethan cut in, his voice low but sharp. "I understand business decisions perfectly well. What I don't understand is how you could let Lily get so attached, let us believe we meant something, only to—" He stopped, swallowing hard. Charlotte stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "You did mean something. You do mean something. Both of you." She reached for his arm, but he stepped back. "I fought for weeks to find another solution. You're the CEO," Ethan interrupted. "You have all the power in the world up here in your glass castle. Don't pretend you were helpless." Tears spilled onto Charlotte's cheeks, smudging her perfect makeup. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I chose wrong. I've spent my whole life believing success meant profits and power, but these past few months, with you and Lily." She wiped her eyes. "You showed me what real success looks like. A father's love, a child's trust, a family." "Stop!" Ethan's voice cracked. "Just stop. We're not your family. We're your employees, former employees now. And we're leaving town next week. I've got a cousin in Cleveland who can help me find work." Charlotte pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. "Please don't go. We can figure something out. I can—" "What? Give me my job back out of pity, or maybe keep me around as your charity case?" The bitterness in his voice made her flinch. "I've got my pride, Charlotte. It's all I have left." Through the glass walls, they could see Lily showing her drawing to the assistant, chattering animatedly. The sight made Charlotte's shoulders shake with silent sobs. "She loved you," Ethan said quietly. "Really loved you. Not your money or your status, just you. And you broke her heart." "I love her too," Charlotte whispered. "And I—" She looked up at him, her eyes full of unspoken words. Ethan turned away. "Lily," he called out. "Time to go, sweetheart." Lily ran back in, hugging Charlotte's legs. "Can't you come with us, please?" Charlotte knelt again, cupping Lily's face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, my sweet girl. I'm so very sorry." She pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead, leaving a faint lipstick mark. "But you're my mommy now," Lily insisted, fresh tears falling. Ethan gently pulled Lily away. "Come on, honey. Say goodbye to Miss Grant." "Goodbye?" Lily's voice cracked on the word. "No, Daddy, please." Ethan lifted his crying daughter into his arms, her face buried in his neck. He paused at the door, looking back one last time at Charlotte. She stood alone in her vast office, mascara streaking her cheeks, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold something together that was already broken. "Ethan," she called out softly. "I never meant—" "Goodbye, Charlotte," he said firmly, and walked out. The elevator doors closed on Lily's continued sobs. Ethan held her close, his own tears finally falling into her hair. Later that night, Charlotte sat in her dark office, the city lights twinkling below like distant stars. On her desk, illuminated by her small desk lamp, lay Lily's original drawing, the one that had started everything. 3 stick figures holding hands. Daddy, Lily, and Mommy Charlotte. Her fingers traced the crayon lines as tears dripped onto the paper. "Not again," she whispered into the empty room. "I won't lose them." The words hung in the silence of her office. A promise made too late in a room, too big, too empty, too cold without the warmth of the family she'd almost had. Charlotte Grant sat in her corner office, the city lights twinkling like stars through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her laptop screen cast a blue glow across her desk, where Lily's crayon drawing lay, the one showing all 3 of them holding hands. Her fingers brushed across the childish scrawl that spelled out, "Mommy." The clock on her wall showed 11:42 p.m. The building was empty, except for the night security team and a few dedicated employees burning the midnight oil. She'd been sitting here for hours, wrestling with the decision that would change everything. Her desk phone buzzed. "Ms. Grant, the board's resolution papers are ready for your signature first thing tomorrow morning." Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Thank you, Janet. You can go home now." Charlotte's voice was steady, masking the turmoil inside. After the call ended, she opened her laptop and began typing. "Dear members of the board, I, Charlotte Grant, hereby tender my resignation as Chief Executive Officer of Maxwell Industries, effective immediately." She paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder flashed through her mind. The missed birthdays, the canceled vacations, the relationships she'd sacrificed. All for this position. And now, she was walking away. Charlotte stood up and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Far below, the city streets were still busy with late-night traffic. Somewhere out there, in a modest apartment, Ethan was probably helping Lily pack their belongings. The thought made her chest ache. Returning to her desk, she continued typing, "My tenure as CEO has been marked by significant financial growth and shareholder value. However, I've come to realize that true leadership isn't measured solely by profit margins and stock prices. It's measured by the lives we touch and the communities we build." She thought of Ethan's dignity as he mopped these floors every night, never complaining, always ensuring Lily had a warm meal and a bedtime story. She thought of Lily's innocent smile, her trust, her love freely given. The decision to outsource our maintenance staff may appear financially sound on paper, but it fails to account for the human cost. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they're families, dreams, and futures. Memories flooded her mind. Decorating the Christmas tree with Lily, sharing pizza in that cramped booth, watching Ethan's face soften when he thought no one was looking. For the first time in years, she'd felt like she belonged somewhere, with someone. "My position has afforded me many privileges, but it has also shown me what truly matters. We've built our success on the backs of dedicated employees, like our maintenance staff, people who work tirelessly behind the scenes to keep this company running smoothly." Charlotte wiped away an unexpected tear. The words were flowing now, straight from her heart. "I cannot, in good conscience, continue to lead an organization that values quarterly profits over the well-being of its people. This is not the legacy I wish to leave behind." Her office suddenly felt suffocating. All the awards, the certificates, the markers of success that had once meant everything to her. Now they seemed hollow, meaningless, compared to a child's crayon drawing. "I understand this decision may come as a shock, but it is final. I believe Maxwell Industries needs leadership that can balance profitability with humanity. I am no longer that person. She thought of her own childhood, growing up without a father, always longing for a complete family. How ironic that she'd nearly repeated that pattern, choosing corporate success over human connection. Effective immediately, I am also announcing the creation of the New Beginnings Foundation, dedicated to supporting working families and single parents. I will be using my severance package and personal resources to fund this initiative. Her hands were steady now, her vision clear. For the first time since becoming CEO, she felt truly powerful. Not because of her position, but because of her choice to walk away from it. I trust the board will handle this transition professionally and hope you will reconsider the decision to outsource our maintenance staff. These employees deserve better than to be treated as disposable assets. Charlotte added the formal closing paragraphs, including her official notice period and transition details. Then she read through the letter one final time, making sure every word reflected her conviction. She glanced at her phone. No messages from Ethan. Of course not. She'd betrayed his trust, chosen corporate responsibility over human connection. But not anymore. With determined clicks, she attached the letter to an email addressed to the board of directors. Her cursor hovered over the send button as decades of ambition and sacrifice flashed through her mind one last time. Charlotte took a deep breath and pressed send. The whoosh of the email departing her outbox seemed to take all her burdens with it. She exhaled slowly, feeling lighter than she had in years. For the first time since she'd taken the CEO position, she felt truly free. The late afternoon sky hung heavy with dark clouds, threatening to unleash a downpour at any moment. Inside their small apartment, Ethan methodically wrapped dishes in old newspaper, placing them carefully in cardboard boxes he'd collected from the grocery store. The living room was already half-packed, with towers of boxes creating a cardboard maze. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, hugging her stuffed bunny close as she watched her father work. "Do we have to take everything, Daddy?" "Just what we need, sweetheart," Ethan replied softly, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. He'd found a job prospect 3 towns over, nothing fancy, but it would keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. That's what mattered now. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain began to patter against the windows. Lily jumped at the sound, clutching her bunny tighter. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Ethan paused his packing, setting down the plate he held. "I know, baby. But sometimes—" A knock at the door cut him off. 3 sharp raps that seemed to echo through their half-empty apartment. Ethan frowned, not expecting any visitors. They'd already said goodbye to the neighbors. When he opened the door, his heart stopped. Charlotte Grant stood in the hallway, completely drenched from the rain. Her usually perfect hair clung to her face, and her expensive blazer was soaked through. She looked nothing like the polished CEO he knew. Instead, she seemed smaller, vulnerable. "Ethan," she breathed, "please don't shut the door. I need to talk to you." "Mommy Charlotte," Lily called from inside, but Ethan held up his hand, stopping her from running over. "There's nothing left to say," Ethan said firmly, though his voice wavered slightly. "We're leaving tomorrow." Charlotte stepped forward, water dripping onto the worn hallway carpet. "I resigned." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan blinked, sure he'd misheard. "What?" "I resigned as CEO," Charlotte repeated, stronger this time. "This morning. I couldn't be that person anymore. The one who puts profits over people, the one who hurts families like yours." Despite himself, Ethan found his grip on the door loosening. Charlotte continued, words tumbling out as if she'd rehearsed them but couldn't quite keep them in order. "I've been up all night thinking about what really matters. About my life before I met you and Lily. How empty it was. All those years climbing the corporate ladder. And for what? To sit alone in my penthouse? To make decisions that hurt good people?" Rain dripped from her hair, but she didn't seem to notice. "I'm using my severance package and connections to start a foundation for single parents, working families who need support, the kind of support I never had growing up, the kind you deserve." Ethan's throat felt tight. "Charlotte, please." She stepped closer, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want you to run it with me. As Director of Operations, you understand what these families need better than anyone. Your experience, Your heart? That's exactly what this foundation needs. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the hallway. In that brief moment, Ethan saw something raw and honest in Charlotte's face that he'd never seen before. "I know I hurt you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I know I chose wrong. But I'm trying to make it right, not just for you and Lily, but for all the families out there struggling to make ends meet. People shouldn't have to choose between dignity and survival." Lily had crept closer during Charlotte's speech, and now she stood beside Ethan, looking up at Charlotte with wide eyes. "Are you really staying, Mommy Charlotte?" Charlotte knelt down, not caring that her designer skirt was getting dirty on the hallway floor. "If your daddy will let me, sweetheart, I want to stay more than anything." "The foundation," Ethan said slowly. "How would it work?" "We'd provide emergency assistance, job training, childcare support. Help people get back on their feet with dignity." Charlotte stood, reaching into her wet blazer to pull out a slightly damp folder. "I've been working on the plans all week. Everything's in place. Funding, board members, structure. We just need someone who understands, someone with real experience to help run it." She held out the folder to him. "Someone like you, Ethan." The hallway fell silent except for the steady drum of rain outside. Ethan stared at the folder, then at Charlotte's outstretched hand. He thought about all the nights he'd spent worrying about bills, about Lily's future, about whether he was enough for his daughter. He thought about Charlotte's laughter during their pizza dinner, about how natural she'd looked decorating Christmas cookies with Lily. Before he could respond, Lily darted forward and threw her arms around Charlotte's waist. Charlotte immediately hugged her back, dropping the folder to wrap both arms around the little girl. Her eyes met Ethan's over Lily's head, filled with hope and fear, and something else, something that looked a lot like love. Ethan turned away, his heart pounding. The decision weighing on him felt impossible. Could he trust her again? Could he risk Lily's heart, and his own, one more time? The folder lay at his feet, water from Charlotte's clothes slowly seeping into its edges. Inside were the plans that could change not just their lives, but countless others. A chance to help families like his own, to make a real difference, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to be whole again. He stared at the far wall, listening to Lily's muffled words as she clung to Charlotte, unable to look at either of them as his mind raced with possibilities and fears. The rain started as a gentle patter against the windows, matching the thoughtful silence in Ethan's small apartment. Charlotte sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, her designer suit wrinkled, surrounded by scattered papers and half-empty coffee cups. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, her bunny tucked safely under her arm. "So, what exactly are you thinking?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet to avoid waking his daughter. He settled into his old armchair, still trying to process Charlotte's sudden appearance and her announcement about resigning as CEO. Charlotte's eyes lit up as she reached for one of the papers. "Look at these statistics," she said, spreading out several documents. "Did you know that over 40% of single parents in our city struggle to maintain stable employment due to childcare issues? And that's just the tip of the iceberg." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew those struggles all too well. The constant juggling act between work and parenting, the impossible choices, the endless worry. "What if," Charlotte continued, her voice gaining momentum, "we created a space that actually supported working parents, not just with childcare but with job training, flexible scheduling, and real opportunities for advancement?" "It sounds amazing," Ethan admitted, "but also complicated. The logistics, alone." "That's exactly why I need your help," Charlotte interrupted. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing. "You understand both sides of this, the practical challenges these families face, and how to keep things running smoothly. You've been doing it for years." They spent the next few hours mapping out ideas. Charlotte's business expertise merged with Ethan's real-world experience, creating something neither could have envisioned alone. They discussed everything from facility requirements to staffing needs, from funding sources to community partnerships. The foundation could partner with local businesses, Ethan suggested, warming to the idea. "Create job placement programs that work with parents' schedules, not against them." Charlotte scribbled furiously, nodding. "And we could offer on-site childcare, homework help, maybe even meal services for families struggling with time management. The rain grew heavier outside, but neither noticed. They were too absorbed in their planning, the energy between them electric with possibility. Ethan found himself impressed by how thoroughly Charlotte had thought this through. She'd already secured initial funding through her severance package and had identified potential locations for their first center. "You've really committed to this, haven't you?" Ethan asked, studying her face. Charlotte paused her writing. "I've spent years making money for shareholders who already have more than enough. It's time to do something that actually matters." She glanced at Lily's sleeping form. "Something that helps families like yours." As afternoon faded into evening, they ordered pizza and spread their papers across Ethan's small kitchen table. Charlotte had removed her suit jacket, rolled up her sleeves, and looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her in the corporate tower. "We'll need a strong leadership team," Charlotte mused, taking a bite of pizza. "People who understand our mission from the inside out." Ethan nodded absently, reviewing their notes. "The director of operations position will be crucial. They'll need to coordinate between all the different services, manage the facility, handle staffing." "That's why I want you to do it," Charlotte said simply. Ethan's pizza slice stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" "I want you to be the director of operations," Charlotte repeated, her voice firm. "You're perfect for it." Ethan set his pizza down, shaking his head. "Charlotte, I'm a janitor. I don't have the qualifications." "You have exactly the qualifications we need," she interrupted. "You understand what these families are going through because you've lived it. You know how to manage complex systems. I've seen how you coordinate the entire night cleaning crew. And most importantly, you have something that can't be taught: genuine compassion." Ethan sat back in his chair, stunned. "I wouldn't even know where to start." "Yes, you would," Charlotte insisted. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "I've watched you, Ethan. You don't just clean the building, you notice things. You know when the single mom in accounting needs to work late and make sure her office is cleaned first. You keep extra snacks in your cart for the security guards working double shifts. You've created a whole informal support system without even realizing it." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. He'd never thought about his work that way before. "But the board members, the donors, they'll expect someone with credentials," he protested weakly. Charlotte smiled, the same gentle smile she gave Lily when explaining something important. "You've always led with heart, Ethan. That's exactly what this foundation needs." Ethan glanced at Lily, still sleeping peacefully on the couch. His daughter, who had drawn a picture that had changed everything, who had seen something in Charlotte that even Charlotte herself hadn't recognized, who had, in her innocent way, brought them all to this moment. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but now it felt less like an ending and more like a cleansing, washing away the old to make room for something new. "Director of Operations," Ethan said softly, testing the words. "Director of Operations," Charlotte confirmed, her eyes bright with certainty. Charlotte's eyes lit up as she reached for one of the papers. "Look at these statistics," she said, spreading out several charts. "There are thousands of single parents in this city struggling to make ends meet. We could really make a difference here." Ethan leaned forward, studying the numbers. His years of quiet observation as a janitor had taught him more about people than anyone suspected. "We need to focus on practical help first," he said. "Childcare during work hours, job training, maybe even a food pantry." Charlotte nodded eagerly, jotting notes in her elegant handwriting. "That's exactly why I need you as Director of Operations, Ethan. You understand what these families actually need." Over the next few weeks, their temporary office space, a converted warehouse, buzzed with activity. Ethan threw himself into interviewing potential staff members, his natural empathy helping him spot the right people. He hired Sarah, a former teacher who'd raised 3 kids alone, to run the childcare program. Then came Marcus, who'd worked his way through night school as a single dad, perfect for career counseling. Charlotte, meanwhile, worked her corporate connections, but with a new approach. Instead of cold boardroom presentations, she invited potential donors to meet the families they'd be helping. Her voice would soften as she shared her own story of growing up without a father, then brighten as she described their vision for change. One afternoon, Ethan watched through the window as Charlotte gave a tour to a wealthy businessman. She'd stopped wearing her power suits, choosing instead a simple blazer and jeans. She looked more natural this way, more herself. The businessman wrote a check on the spot. "You're good at this," Ethan told her later as they sorted through applications together. "Better than you were as CEO." Charlotte smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because now I believe in what I'm doing. This isn't about profit margins, it's about people." Lily became their unofficial mascot, greeting visitors and charming donors. She'd set up a little desk next to Ethan's, helping with paperwork by drawing pictures on the backs of forms. Other children began joining her as their parents came for services, turning one corner of the warehouse into an impromptu playroom. The foundation grew faster than either of them expected. Within a month, they had 20 staff members and were serving over 50 families. Each success story felt personal: a single mom landing her first office job, a dad finally able to afford an apartment instead of sleeping in his car. Charlotte and Ethan fell into an easy rhythm, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. She handled the big picture while he managed the daily details. When she got too ambitious, he kept her grounded. When he got overwhelmed, she stepped in with solutions. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising dinner, they found themselves alone in the office. The cleaning crew had gone home. Ethan had insisted on hiring a family-owned company, and the last volunteer had left hours ago. Rain drummed steadily on the warehouse roof, creating a cozy atmosphere in the dimly lit space. They walked through the quiet rooms together, checking windows and turning off lights. Charlotte paused by the childcare area, picking up a stuffed animal someone had left behind. "Remember when this was just an empty warehouse?" she asked, looking around at the colorful walls now covered in children's artwork. "Seems like another lifetime," Ethan replied. He stopped at Lily's little desk, straightening her crayons with careful hands. They reached the main entrance, where their shared dream had become reality. Programs and success stories filled the bulletin board. A hand-painted sign proclaimed, "Welcome to your new beginning." In bright letters, Lily's contribution, with some help from the art therapy group. Ethan pulled out his keys, the same ring that once held only his janitor's keys. Now it carried the responsibility of something much bigger. He turned to Charlotte, emotion making his voice rough. "Thank you," he said simply, "for all of this, for believing in me." Charlotte's eyes shimmered in the dim light. She reached out and touched his arm gently. "No, thank you for giving me a family." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the elementary school playground as parents gathered for the annual spring fair. Ethan adjusted his tie, no longer the worn one from his janitor days, but a new blue silk one Charlotte had given him for his role at the foundation. He felt different now, more confident, though still a bit out of place among the sea of professional parents. Charlotte stood beside him in a simple sundress, having traded her power suits for more casual attire these days. She held a plate of homemade cookies that Lily had insisted they bring. The little girl bounced between them, her pigtails swinging as she pointed out her art display. "Come on! My painting's over here!" Lily tugged at both their hands, leading them through the crowd. The classroom walls were covered in children's artwork, a rainbow explosion of creativity. Lily's painting hung near the center, a bright scene showing 3 figures in front of what was unmistakably their foundation building. Charlotte squeezed Ethan's hand when she saw it, her eyes growing misty. "Mr. Walker," Mrs. Thompson, Lily's teacher, approached with a warm smile. "And, Mrs. Walker, so lovely to see you both here together." She gestured to the painting. "Lily's work has really blossomed lately. She's so much more confident." Ethan opened his mouth to correct the assumption about Charlotte's last name, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Charlotte's hand tightened in his, or how natural it felt to be standing there as a family. "Thank you," Charlotte replied smoothly, her professional poise masking any surprise at being called Mrs. Walker. "We're so proud of her progress." Other parents drifted over, drawn by the cookies and conversation. Sarah Chen, mother of Lily's best friend Emma, joined them. "I was just telling my husband how wonderful it is that you both make time for these events, even with running the foundation." "We wouldn't miss it," Ethan said, surprising himself with how easily the words came. The pride in his voice wasn't just about Lily anymore, It was about all of them, about what they'd built together. Charlotte seamlessly joined conversations with other parents about school committees and upcoming events. She looked completely at home, nothing like the intimidating CEO she'd once been. When someone mentioned the next PTA meeting, she pulled out her phone to add it to their shared calendar. Lily dragged them from artwork to artwork, explaining each piece with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. They stopped at her friend Tommy's dinosaur drawing, and his mother Sandra smiled at them. "You three make such a beautiful family," Sandra commented. "How long have you been married?" This time, Charlotte saved Ethan from answering by directing everyone's attention to the children's science projects displayed on the adjacent table. She did it so smoothly, no one noticed the question went unanswered. As they moved through the fair, Ethan noticed how naturally they fell into sync. Charlotte knew exactly when Lily needed a juice box from her bag. Ethan automatically reached to steady Charlotte when she stumbled slightly on an uneven patch of playground. They moved like a well-practiced dance team, anticipating each other's steps. The afternoon light softened as parents and children began heading home. Lily had her arms full of art projects and a certificate for most creative use of colors. She skipped ahead of them, chattering with Emma about their next playdate. "Did you see my volcano experiment, Mommy?" Lily called back to Charlotte. The word Mommy no longer carried any awkwardness or pain. It had become as natural as breathing. "I did, sweetheart. The red paint for lava was very realistic," Charlotte answered, her free hand finding Ethan's as they walked. They passed the school's garden where they'd helped plant flowers last month during the community service day. Charlotte had shown up in gardening clothes, kneeling in the dirt beside Ethan as they taught Lily about different plants. The memory made him smile. "What are you thinking about?" Charlotte asked softly, noticing his expression. "Just how different everything is now," he replied. "Good different." She nodded, understanding flowing between them without need for more words. Ahead, Lily waved goodbye to Emma and her parents, then ran back to walk between them. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. "It's almost dinner time," Ethan started to say, but Charlotte was already laughing. "Maybe just this once," she said, winking at him. "We are celebrating your amazing art show after all." They stopped at the small ice cream shop on the corner, their regular place now. The owner, Mr. Giuseppe, greeted them with a knowing smile. "The usual for the Walker family?" This time, neither Ethan nor Charlotte corrected him. They sat at their favorite table by the window, Lily between them, sharing spoonfuls of different flavors and making plans for the weekend. As the spring evening settled around them, they began the walk home. Lily skipped ahead again, her art projects clutched carefully to her chest. Charlotte's hand found Ethan's once more, fitting perfectly into his calloused palm. The street lamps flickered on, casting a gentle glow over the familiar path to their apartment building. Everything had changed since that first night Lily had drawn her picture in the corporate boardroom. Yet somehow, it felt like this was always where they were meant to end up, walking home together, hand in hand, their footsteps in perfect rhythm. They entered their neighborhood, where children played on front stoops and neighbors called out evening greetings. Here, among the modest apartments and small businesses, Charlotte looked more at home than she ever had in her luxury penthouse. She waved to Mrs. Rodriguez, watering her window boxes, asked about her grandson's college applications. Lily ran ahead to push the button for the crosswalk, her voice carrying back to them. "Hurry up, slowpokes!" Ethan and Charlotte exchanged amused glances, their joined hands swinging gently between them as they walked. The weight of their fingers intertwined felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. The evening settled softly over their modest apartment, carrying with it the mouth-watering aroma of roasting chicken and herbs. Charlotte stood in Ethan's small kitchen, her designer blazer traded for one of his old aprons, her sleeves rolled up as she arranged roasted vegetables on a serving plate. The transformation from corporate CEO to this relaxed, domestic version of herself seemed as natural as breathing now. Ethan watched her from the doorway, still amazed at how seamlessly she had woven herself into their lives. She moved around his kitchen like she'd always belonged there, reaching for plates in the right cabinets, knowing exactly where he kept the good napkins. "Daddy, I'm starving." Lily bounced in her chair at their small dining table, her homework pushed aside. "Can we eat now, please?" Charlotte laughed, carrying the platter to the table. "Perfect timing, sweetheart. This bird is done to perfection, if I do say so myself." "It smells amazing," Ethan said, taking his seat. "I didn't know CEOs could cook." "Ex-CEO," Charlotte corrected with a wink. "And my grandmother taught me. She said even busy women should know how to make a proper Sunday dinner." The chicken was golden brown, surrounded by carrots and potatoes that glistened with herbs and butter. It wasn't fancy restaurant fare, but somehow that made it more special. This was real, home-cooked food made with love. "Miss Charlotte, you're better at cooking than Daddy," Lily declared, earning a mock, offended, "Hey!" from Ethan. "I'll have you know my mac and cheese is legendary," Ethan protested, serving Lily a piece of chicken. Charlotte's eyes danced with amusement. "From the box doesn't count, Director Walker." "Oh, pulling rank now, are we?" He grinned, passing her the vegetables. Their laughter filled the small space, bouncing off the walls and mixing with the clink of silverware. It felt right, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Lily regaled them with stories from school. Charlotte shared funny moments from the Foundation's latest project, and Ethan couldn't stop smiling at how normal it all felt. After dinner, Lily sprawled on the living room floor with her coloring books, content and full. Charlotte insisted on helping with dishes, despite Ethan's protests. "You cooked. I should clean," he argued. But she just bumped him with her hip, taking the sponge from his hand. "We can do it together," she said softly. "I like doing normal things like this." They fell into a rhythm, Ethan washing, Charlotte drying. The comfortable silence between them held weight, filled with unspoken words that had been building for months. Charlotte placed the last plate in the cabinet and turned to face him. Her usual confident demeanor wavered slightly, showing a vulnerability that few ever saw. "Ethan," she began, twisting the dish towel in her hands. "I need to tell you something." He dried his hands slowly, his heart picking up speed. "Okay, when I first met you and Lily, I was so focused on my career that I'd forgotten what really matters. I had everything society said I should want: money, power, success. But I was lonely." She took a deep breath. "Then this little girl showed me a drawing, and my whole world shifted." Ethan leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed on her face. "Charlotte, please let me finish," she said. "I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable. But you and Lily showed me what family means, what love means." Her voice softened. "I've fallen in love with both of you." The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Through the doorway they could hear Lily humming to herself as she colored, oblivious to the moment unfolding in the kitchen. Ethan moved closer to Charlotte, reaching for her hands. "When Kate died, I thought that was it for me. I focused everything on Lily, on surviving. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again." He squeezed her hands gently. "But you crashed into our lives with your power suits and board meetings, and somehow you made us whole again." Charlotte's eyes glistened. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you too," Ethan said simply. "We both do." Charlotte released a shaky breath, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. Ethan reached up, cupping her cheek with one hand. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they met in the middle, the kiss was gentle, tender, a culmination of months of growing closer, of building trust, of creating something beautiful from unexpected beginnings. Charlotte's hands found their way to Ethan's shoulders, while his free arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her closer. In the living room, Lily continued humming, the sound a perfect backdrop to this moment of quiet joy in the kitchen. When they finally pulled apart, Charlotte rested her forehead against Ethan's, both of them smiling. "You know," she whispered, "I think Lily knew all along. That drawing. She's pretty smart for a 7-year-old, Ethan chuckled softly. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, listening to Lily's happy humming from the next room. The dishes were done, the evening was settling into night, and finally, everything felt exactly as it should be. The Foundation's grand opening buzzed with energy as families filled the newly renovated community center. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the polished floors that Ethan once mopped in solitude. Now he stood at a podium before hundreds of people, his hands steady on the wooden edges as he looked out at the crowd. Charlotte stood to his right, elegant in a simple blue dress that made her look more like a proud mother than a former CEO. Lily sat in the front row, wearing her favorite yellow sundress, beaming up at them both with unrestrained joy. "A year ago," Ethan began, his voice clear and strong, "I was cleaning these very floors at night, wondering how I'd keep food on the table for my daughter." He paused, meeting the understanding eyes of other single parents in the audience. "I thought dignity meant doing it all alone, never asking for help, never letting anyone in." His gaze found Charlotte's, and warmth flooded his chest at her encouraging smile. "But my daughter Lily taught me something important. She showed me that sometimes family finds you when you least expect it." She drew a picture that changed everything, a simple crayon drawing of 3 people holding hands. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd as Lily bounced in her seat, proud of her role in the story. Ethan continued, "That drawing made its way to Charlotte Grant, who was CEO of the very building I cleaned. And instead of dismissing it as a child's fantasy, she saw something more. She saw possibility. She saw family." Charlotte dabbed at her eyes discreetly, but her professional composure remained intact. Ethan's voice grew stronger as he spoke about dignity. "I learned that true dignity isn't about refusing help or keeping your walls up. It's about having the courage to let others in. It's about standing tall while accepting support. It's about building something bigger than yourself." He gestured to the renovated space around them. "This foundation exists because Charlotte chose compassion over corporate success. She taught me that second chances aren't just about starting over. They're about building something better together." The audience nodded, many wiping away tears of their own. Parents held their children closer, recognizing their own struggles in Ethan's words. "Today, we're not just opening a building," Ethan continued. "We're opening doors for families who need support. We're creating a place where single parents can find resources, childcare, job training, and most importantly, community. Because no one should have to do it alone." Charlotte stepped forward then, placing her hand on Ethan's shoulder. The gesture was simple but spoke volumes about their journey from employer and employee to partners in every sense. "This foundation will ensure that other families like mine have the chance to thrive, not just survive," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Because sometimes the greatest dignity comes from letting love in, from accepting help, from building bridges instead of walls." As he finished speaking, Lily could no longer contain herself. She bounded onto the stage, her yellow dress swishing as she grabbed both their hands. The crowd burst into applause, touched by the genuine affection between the 3 of them. A photographer stepped forward, camera raised. "How about a photo of the family who made this all possible?" Ethan started to demur, but Lily was already positioning them, tugging their hands until they stood together. Charlotte's eyes sparkled with happy tears as she wrapped one arm around Ethan's waist and held Lily's hand with the other. The moment crystallized. Ethan, in his new suit, no longer a janitor, but the foundation's director, standing tall with quiet pride. Charlotte, who had traded corporate power for the power of love, glowing with joy. And between them, Lily, whose innocent wisdom had brought them together. The photographer adjusted his lens. "Perfect," he said. "Just perfect." And as the flashbulbs popped, capturing their smiles, Ethan realized that dignity wasn't what he'd once thought. It wasn't about status or struggle or solitude. True dignity was standing here with his family, helping others find their way home just as he had found his. The picture would show 3 people, but it captured something more. It captured hope, second chances, and the beautiful truth that family could grow from the most unexpected beginnings. Their smiles told the story of a journey from loneliness to belonging, from separation to unity, from broken pieces to wholeness. The applause swelled, and Lily squeezed their hands tighter, her face radiant with the pure joy of a child who had wished for a family and seen that wish come true. In that moment, they weren't just posing for a photograph. They were standing as living proof that love could bridge any gap, heal any heart, and build something beautiful from the humblest of beginnings. The sunset painted streaks of orange and pink across the sky as Ethan's car pulled into the driveway of Charlotte's mansion, their home now. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her small body curled around the stuffed bunny she never went anywhere without. The day's excitement had finally caught up with her. Charlotte reached back and gently brushed a strand of hair from Lily's peaceful face. "Should we wake her?" she whispered. Ethan shook his head, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'll carry her." He opened the car door quietly and lifted Lily into his arms with practiced ease. Her head nestled against his shoulder, and she mumbled something about cookies in her sleep. Charlotte hurried ahead to open the front door, her heels clicking softly on the stone path. The house welcomed them with warm light spilling from the windows. Inside, their footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Floors that reminded Ethan of where their story began, though they felt different now. These floors were home. They climbed the curved staircase together, Charlotte's hand resting lightly on Ethan's back as he carried their sleeping daughter. Their daughter. The thought still made his heart skip a beat. Lily's room was a wonder of childhood dreams, pale pink walls decorated with twinkling fairy lights that Charlotte had helped her hang. Stuffed animals watched from shelves that Ethan had mounted himself, and artwork, including that first drawing that had changed everything, hung proudly on the walls. Charlotte pulled back the covers of Lily's bed, while Ethan gently laid her down. She stirred slightly as he removed her shoes, but didn't wake. Charlotte carefully changed her into pajamas, movements soft and motherly, so different from the businesswoman she'd once been. Together, they tucked the blankets around her small form. Lily's eyes fluttered open briefly, heavy with sleep. A drowsy smile spread across her face as she looked up at them both. "Good night, Mommy," she murmured, reaching for Charlotte's hand. "Good night, Daddy." Charlotte's breath caught audibly, and Ethan felt tears prick at his own eyes. He squeezed Charlotte's free hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. They stood there, holding hands in the soft glow of the nightlight, watching their daughter drift back to sleep. Lily's chest rose and fell with steady breaths, her face peaceful and trusting. In that moment, Ethan remembered all the nights he'd stood alone by this bedside, wondering if he could ever give his daughter the family she deserved. Now, Charlotte's warm hand in his answered that question. Charlotte leaned her head against his shoulder, and he felt wetness where her tears touched his shirt. He understood perfectly. Sometimes joy was too big for words, too pure for anything but quiet tears. They stayed that way for a long while, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Their shadows merged on the wall behind them, two becoming one, while their daughter slept soundly before them. In the silence, they made their promise not with words, but with the steady pressure of clasped hands and hearts beating in time. They would never let go. Not of Lily, not of each other, not of this precious gift they'd found in the most unexpected place. Their love story, born in the midnight hours of a corporate building, had blossomed into something far more valuable than any business success. Lily shifted in her sleep, hugging her bunny closer. Charlotte squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, and he returned the pressure. They stood as guardians of their daughter's dreams, as partners in this beautiful life they'd built together, as a family bound by love stronger than any corporate contract or social expectation. The night wrapped around them like a gentle embrace, and in the soft glow of Lily's room, they remained. Standing, watching, loving, together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Walker, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.